Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy and blessings of Almighty God be with each and every one of you. Today my message is short and sweet. I want to start with what I love to tell, and that is stories. I love stories. So the story is about a man who is considered in the West as the father of Western medicine. His name was Hippocrates. Hippocrates was so famous in his days that the king called him as the chief physician. Now Hippocrates had a neighbor who was also a physician who did not appreciate that Hippocrates and not himself was called the chief physician. So he went to the king and challenged that in a certain way. He said, "Why don't you have Hippocrates and myself, each one prepare a poison for the other and give him that poison and then ask that person to cure himself. And the person who cures himself first will deserve that title of being the chief physician." The king was amused by that suggestion and he agreed immediately. He called Hippocrates and he told them the suggestion of his neighbor. Hippocrates, feeling very confident of himself, he immediately agreed. So they both went, each one to get busy preparing the poison for the other person. Now Hippocrates did something that was ingenious. So what did he do? For 40 days, he would at the same time bring a mortar and pestle, and then he would make sure that his neighbor would hear him knocking in the mortar with his pestle, giving the impression that he was preparing something so sophisticated that took 40 days to finish. Then after the 40 days, both of them were summoned to the palace of the king, and the king asked the neighbor first to administer the poison to Hippocrates. So he gave him that poison. Hippocrates went home and after a few days came back feeling much better. He was cured. And then it was the turn of Hippocrates to give the poison to his neighbor. So he did. And what happened? Within an hour or less, that neighbor died. And the king was really taken by surprise. He looked at Hippocrates and he said, "What kind of a potent poison did you administer to your neighbor? What did you give him that made him die in less than an hour?" Hippocrates looked at the king and told him, "Your Majesty, all I gave him was plain water. But for 40 days, at the same time, I used that device that I prepare my medicine in, the mortar and the pestle, and I just made noise. And he thought that I was preparing something that is lethal. And all I gave him was just water." And what happened is that Hippocrates made sure that little bit of that water remained in the tube that contained the supposedly poison to his neighbor. So Hippocrates took it to give the king the assurance that it was water, and he drank it himself and nothing happened to him. So the moral of the story, I'm sure that many of you started to feel that moral, is that panic and fear can kill you. And in medicine, we know that fear and panic help to secrete certain hormones in our bodies that are lethal for our organs. So in these days where there are so many theories circulating So many stories that make even the older, wise people feel a little worried. You shouldn't allow these things to overtake you. You shouldn't be afraid. Your faith will carry you through because the Almighty God gives us that assurance, and we don't need anyone but God to give us that assurance. قل لن يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. Allah is our sustainer. God is our protector. And we depend on Allah. And we will get through this crisis safely. So be hopeful. Be happy. Don't let those things that circulate on the net kill you. Because you just heard what happened at the time of Hippocrates. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.